right, we're, back in session. I need an okay to, reopen the, board meeting.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Okay, we're gonna go to, new business, B, consideration of financial assistance for the island companies. And just to refresh your minds, we've gone through a public meeting, when we've had some time to, got a lot of stuff from our executive director, because this is a somewhat complicated deal. This is an organization that's been operating here for a long time. They're doing a heck of a good job, and they're, our largest, one of our largest, I can't say it's the largest because I don't know, but industrial operations going on in this town. So what we need to do at this time, because it is, there's a lot of moving parts, and they're very hard to decide where you're gonna go with this and where you're gonna go with this. There's four buildings, 5 buildings, or five projects? Four. So what we wanted to do is, during our meeting, to consider where we are, what questions we might have at this point in time, how we feel about the thing. But what we're looking to do first is to establish an approach that's, makes sense from the standpoint of what we've done in the past, how this operation works, and what it is to the town, and then to go on from there. So I'd like for Tracy to start it off, and she'll refresh our memories and try to get us, once again into which building is which and what's being done in which building, and so forth, so please.
Okay, so we have the overhead map. This is just to sort of put this monster into a project, because normally you'll see a project, it's one site, it's one building, it's increased infrastructure, and this involves everything. And I like to remind the board that we are working on a retention project here, that, they had seriously considered out-of-state operations and pulling their operations out of not only Riverhead, but New York State. To that end, the CFO had done, just to back up that, the validity of their search, this is for in-house purposes, these are his calculations on some labor. If you went.
This is information from Island,
Yeah,
from their,
well, it's
finance.
internal information from the CFO, the analysis the CFO did on labor,
okay,
compared to a state comparison.
right, so it wasn't from Denise, is what I'm saying, this isn't something we generated.
No, we did not
That's
generate
what I
this.
wanted to make sure.
Because the claim originally was there's, a $5 million operating difference each year if they had gone to Pennsylvania. Additionally, I did request, some proof that they were negotiating with Pennsylvania, and I do have a broker's, letter here, back and forth.
Good.
I can supply that if you wanna see it. It was for property in Pennsylvania.
And how about New Jersey?
He didn't send me anything from New Jersey. I did this afternoon when you asked me.
I understand.
But they did their research. I don't know if they actually had an offer from New Jersey, but they were looking in New Jersey, which prompted some of these numbers.
And do we have some verification about, what they got from the state of New York? Or what they
Yes.
expect from the state
So
of New
from the state of New York, as you recall, these negotiations have been going on for over a year now. And the state of New York over the summer, incentivized them for an approximately $4 million to stay in New York. And I have the, offer letter from the state of New York.
And what form did that take, those incentives?
Excelsior program, tax
So those
credits.
tax credits for jobs,
Correct.
right, so they attach to each individual job?
They do, and there must be something for an investment tax credit as well.
Okay, so that's capital improvements,
Mm-hmm.
okay, so they get credits on their tax forms based on the number of employees they have and the
The
and the amount
increase,
of
right.
capital improvements that they're making.
Correct, similar to Amazon,
Yeah.
you know, you hear the big number with Amazon, but it's really based on performance, so unless they create, they don't
They
get.
don't get, right.
During the tour on Friday, Jim had asked how many employees are actually from the town of Riverhead. The base number we started at the beginning of last year for them was about 214 employees, and they projected to hire, 80. They ran me an estimated total today, 101 of them from 11901 alone.
Okay. 101?
101 employees, a total of 136 from all of Riverhead, so I've got,
About half then, ultimately.
well, 7 zip codes, and I hope they're all from Riverhead. We got 11931, 11933, 11949, 47, 48, and 70.
47 and 31
470 is-
and
470 actually is 0, so scratch that one.
19 what?
948,
That's Laurel, that's where I am.
okay,
Laurel.
947,
that's Jamesport.
Jamesport.
949,
Wading River,
9,
no?
792.
Manorville.
Manorville?
oh, okay, so there's 15 people from Manorville. But,
That fixed.
933 is Calverton, and 931 is Jamesport also, or Akabog.
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 So, say that again, there were a total of 101 employees from Riverhead?
From 11901,
Oh, okay,
That's the existing on the existing total,
yes.
right, and then the next 80 will come from wherever, yeah.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
That's.
Actually, I was, if they had 5, I would've been happy. That was pretty impressive to me.
So their expectation is they'll get most of the project.
Zip codes.
Yeah.
Or roll
Here.
Riverhead Township zip.
You know, we did it this afternoon, I quickly gave them zip codes that I was familiar with, and, I can get a better, more confirmed number. We actually asked that on the compliance report, so, but we're not gonna
So
get those
basically,
back
you
till
took
February.
136 people from the township of Riverhead.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, there's 15 now, they said from Manorville, so, 115 from Riverhead, out of 214.
Yeah.
And before I get into this, I'll actually answer some of the other questions that had come up about bonding. They did send me a spreadsheet of the bonds, these are performance and labor bonds.
So
And,
when they build something, the, company that they're building it for wants to be sure that they have the ability to produce what they say they're gonna produce, so they have to put up a performance bond to show that they can build it at the price they've specified, and a labor and material bond to specify that they have the ability to pay their laborers and their suppliers for the materials that they procure. We as the town would get a similar bond in any public works project. So because they're really building public works projects off-site, they're required to bond those, projects, the component of those projects. And I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
No,
just so
no,
everybody
that's very
understands that. And evidently that's an expense, a significant expense to them on a cash flow basis, to maintain those bonds.
Is that a New York State requirement?
That's
So-
that's the people that they're working
with,
for.
okay, so that
So the
cost
bank-
would not necessarily go away had they gone to,
No, that cost wouldn't go away.
Right.
That's gonna be the bank, a bank, you tell me you're gonna build a building for a certain price, the bank loans you the money, you hire them to provide this portion of the building.
right,
The bank
Wants
wants
to
to be
make sure,
sure that they're
okay.
gonna deliver that object at
Right.
that price.
right,
Free and clear of any liens.
right, they want them to pay their vendors, their suppliers, and their,
Okay.
and their
Because
labor, for their
they're-
subcontractors.
Because they're subject to the lien law. When they cause their material to be installed at the site, it becomes subject to the New York lien law and could affect the bank's priority of its lien, would be subject to the lien of the suppliers and the materialmen.
right,
So
okay.
they wanna be sure that they're covered for
Mhm.
that. And not,
Okay, I'm just trying
has
to-
nothing to do with their creditworthiness, it's just a function of
Of the
how,
financing.
of how these projects are accomplished.
Right,
And it's not just the cost, it is a factor that should be considered when, these individual owners, small business owners, they leverage themselves. So it's, risk versus return and the investment they're gonna make, so they're putting a lot on the line for about a 3% return when they leverage themselves out so much and guarantee these bonds. Did I say that correctly? So that was just, so they have, over $48 million, worth of bond, and they're about to sign on another 74, so it's significant to note.
74,
Million.
big leap.
So, back to the map. Those were some of the questions, I think I got them all.
I have one question on that. When we go through this, I'm just curious, I mean, I went through these, but I'd like to mark the bill.
Yep, that's what we're gonna do.
Oh, okay.
So, there was a request for abatements and deferments on 4 properties. This large property up here was the original property back in 2001, the 3 C, A, and B.
Okay.
If you wanna mark it, we'll consider that Cal 81.
So that's 400 Berman.
That's Cal 81.
Oh, okay.
They, were renting here originally, and the IDA, induced them and incentivized them to purchase the building. We bonded it and provided a pilot. I believe what I'm gonna describe to you is at the bottom of your spreadsheet under each, property. Although they were provided a pilot for 10 years, 100% declining for 10 years on that property, the agreement was they were gonna get a pilot on the increase to assessed value. There was no increase to assessed value given their occupation of the building, occupying the building. So they paid their regular tax levy through the pilot. There was no abatement, in other words. They paid the full tax load till 2006. 2006, they were going to expand the 60,000 square foot, which is building E on Cal 81. So the IDA bonded with them another 1.5 million for equipment, and for the expansion provided a 10-year pilot, the standard 100% declining over 10 years.
On the improvement.
On the improvement, and that ended this year. The red portion of that map is a proposed additional 60,000 square foot, which, for purposes of discussion today, is not part of this spreadsheet.
Just to clarify, why would that be?
This 60,000 square feet is gonna take, we don't have a site plan or building drawings or anything to base, we have an estimate on what it would cost, but we wouldn't be able to, estimate the assessed value. I mean, I could, but there are some environmental constraints, and, town zoning code requirements that need to be changed in order for them to be able to do this expansion.
So this is something that's, to a large degree unknown. So we need to,
There'll be some maneuvering,
what's that?
have to do some maneuvering.
Well, I think the town has to come up with a policy, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So, you've got something that's more concrete, and then you've got something that's not, we don't really know where it's gonna go.
Well, they would build it tomorrow if they could.
Sure. So right now, it's hard to talk about, in fact, not a good thing to talk about, speculating what that's gonna be and when it's gonna happen. Anyway,
The orange portion of that is, the parking that they would like outside storage, that they would like the town to consider. Both of which the IDA has no authority for,
Right.
but we can provide support. The next building, down on the bottom, G,
Berman?
H, and F
Mm-hmm.
is 400 Berman Boulevard. G, H, and F, the IDA induced to create a new business. So a lot, as Anthony and Jim heard on Friday during the tour, they literally have everything in-house, from now making their own screws to the roll forms, which was the purpose of the creation of the new business when we induced this 5 years ago. Outside of the material, they basically create the entire wall panels in-house.
It's a fully integrated production facility now.
The red is a proposed 25,000 square foot expansion. That site plan has gone through site plan approval, and again, I believe they're waiting on additional policy from the town of Riverhead in order to finalize that building permits and site plan.
We're not gonna dispute from that now.
The orange is additional outside storage and parking that they're requesting, again, not under our purview. Building I
Mm-hmm.
is 347. That belongs to Mivila of New York. The white is just the portion that they entered into a lease contingent on IDA assistance over the summer. It's a 5-year lease, with a 5-year option. They are currently looking to amend that lease to make it a 5-year option for the next 20 years. They sent me a draft proposal today, because they also want to incorporate what you see as outside storage into their lease, the big orange parcel to the left on your sheet.
This orange is a big deal for a number of reasons.
For them,
Getting
yeah.
that approved,
Yes.
well, it's a big deal for getting the approval too, isn't it?
I don't think it will have any impact for us on, real property taxes.
No, I'm just saying, yes, okay, go ahead.
It's a big deal to keep them here, yes.
All of this is,
All
Yeah,
of this is,
yeah.
right.
Right.
all of it is,
In the beginning of our negotiations, I'm gonna go over to building D, it's over on the right-hand side of your map. It's white. That's building 705. They, when we first started to meet, initially wanted assistance on all 4 of these parcels, I'll call them parcels, sites. We've already negotiated that out of what they requested.
What we consider,
What we'll consider,
right.
and
How
that,
did we do this? Oh, sorry.
'cause I'm good.
What is
Take it
in
for
that
granted,
building? That's not part of it, what is it?
That is part of their manufacturing, they actually have brand new equipment in there that they just ordered to, what were they making in those potty things?
Oh, the bits and
The
that.
bits?
Yep, a lot of the connectors for the walls that they construct, so it's the pieces that basically connect the superstructure of the building to the panels that they're selling, manufacturing and selling.
They just purchased that,
Oh,
and
they purchased this.
no, they've had the building, they purchased new equipment,
Okay,
which
but
is
they
millions.
own the this building?
They own the building,
Okay.
yes,
This is very serious equipment,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, really serious.
or man toys as I call them.
Yeah,
Way beyond that.
ultimate.
So just to keep in the back of your mind, that abatement value that they requested for that building was about a little over $500,000. So we've already negotiated down $500,000 from their original request. I had sent you a spreadsheet on it a few months ago, I think before the public hearings. Yeah, 581,000. To the spreadsheets. The top page is a summary page, and again, these are all estimates, they are projections, they are forecasts. based on 2% increase over 15 years. So your first group one, blue column, is what they're currently paying on these properties. The second group is what they request to pay on the properties, minus the 705 building.
And just to point out, the special district taxes, your board does not abate.
Right.
So you'll see those run in all categories, and it's important for people to realize that those generally reflect sewer, street lighting, water, service-related charges.
They're
Not
very-
school,
they're-
school's not special.
Highway,
They're very,
No.
Highways in the town.
in town,
as a percentage of the total taxes, they're fairly high,
Yes,
so that's one thing to,
special district taxes are fairly high.
as a proportion only, may not be high.
So the subsequent pages break out each individual building. Now, I explained Cal 81, for 400 Berman Boulevard, they currently enjoy a pilot payment. The titles on them are under each individual page. We did Cal 81,
We're on 400 Berman right now?
we're on 400 Berman, yes.
Okay.
So, we calculated this in two steps, because you have a current pilot on it, it's in year 4, next year will be year 5, 6, 5. And their pilot from 5 years ago began at 100% and declined 10% each year over the 10-year period. Next year, they're going to land in the 50% mark. So the first step that I show you is, on the current buildings with no expansion. The second step is an estimate on the expansion of 25,000 square feet, which was provided by the local assessors. It would increase the assessed value by 375,000, and that shows you the standard double 485B, which we typically provide for manufacturers, 100% declining over 10 years.
The map shows 30,000, or is that a different item for 400 Berman?
The square footage on the building, became, an issue with the state, and they've got
Okay.
a letter from the DEC that, set the size of that building at 25,066 square feet.
So that's what we're.
So it's almost 30.
They would like
So when
more?
when they drew the diagram, they were hoping for 30,000, they got a letter in May that said, the state,
Oh,
subject to any other reviews of the state found, the size to be,
Got it.
2566.
Okay.
And in the case of the lease, we apportioned 21.3.
So now you're moving on to building 347.
Sorry, yes, 347.
So, everybody comfortable with 400?
347 is the building they needed to immediately expand in order to meet contractual obligations or get out of Dodge. They took 68,000 square feet, which is approximately 21.3% of the entire building, which is owned by Nibla of New York. And that's how we calculated the current taxes. So the current taxes that you see in group 1 are applicable to 21.3% of the building. Group 2 shows you what they've requested. So, building 347 and currently Cal 81, in the immediate future, do not show an increase in assessed value. 400 will hopefully show an increase in assessed value within a couple of years, and with great hope and motivation and push, we would get a 60,000 square foot expansion over at Cal 81. They have already begun doing their hires. They started over the past 6 months, which we also assisted them with the Department of Labor in meeting those obligations. And again, this is a retention case, and, I just wanted to, this would become one project, as when we're reporting to the state in Paris, we would eliminate the 400 and combine it with this application for one reporting report. Did I make that clear? Okay.
So you're leaving stuff on the table for later on, for the whole potential project, if I heard you right.
I'm not sure I understand.
Well,
How,
what
So-
does part one consist of, in buildings and
Oh, so I did discuss with you
renovations?
today,
Yeah,
phasing this
yes,
as a result of the current situation, and maybe, and also triggers, within the final authorizing resolution. So, for instance, at 400, and these are suggestions or hypotheticals, 400 Berman Boulevard will hold your pilot, you know, or you continue your pilot for the next 5 years. You start to make progress on the building, we're gonna implement a greater pilot.
Right, and we did this with Woolworth, where there was concern about the,
Completion, right?
the first story, tenants.
Correct.
This is a little different here. The applicant actively wants to build the facility, and the question is, when can they build it? So, the idea is to phase in as a separate phase, the 60,000 square foot addition, which your board would hold a separate proceeding on. So you wouldn't be obligating yourself to the answer of what you would do for that building at this time. You would take a wait-and-see approach for those proceedings, and with the understanding that if they do what they say they're going to do, then you would have a range of opportunities to encourage that. So it's just not possible in my mind, to write the legal agreements that talk about what they get for a building that they haven't designed. So rather than try to torture ourselves into, it's a little bit like the aquarium. When the aquarium came in, they said, you know, we got great things planned here. We can start today with 30,000 square feet, and we're gonna come back to you with more square feet, but we can't tell you precisely what's gonna go in those square feet. I don't think anybody thought of a Shark Tank when they came in with the first aquarium, but when they built the second phase to it, it had a Shark Tank. I mean, so now we all look back on it and say, oh, that's pretty logical, that's what happened, but we didn't know that at the time. So. But I think we should call out the requirement that they prosecute the second phase diligently, and show that that's gonna fit in as a component at a later time.
And as always, if they don't do the hires, if they don't, you know, I mean, they've already spent about 1.3, of which they will get no sales tax for in retrofitting this 347 building. So over the time they had come to us and they had to move in immediately, that's money that you'll see in the project costs, but they get no benefit from, given the timeline they were on.
So the phases you're talking about with Tom, 400 Berman is phase one,
Well, I
or,
would probably do a consider 347, Cal 81, and step one of 400 Berman Boulevard as phase one.
oh, I'm sorry, I think maybe I got it backwards then. I thought the 400 Berman was the one that basically they had a site plan for already,
They do.
whereas Cal 81, they've got nothing so far.
That's gonna be the second phase.
Cal 81.
Right.
Okay.
It is confusing, cause there's two boxes that look kind of the same size, but they aren't.
Yeah, so we're doing, the idea is 347 and 400, those are the two we wanna try and,
347, well,
And the retention,
the retention of Cal 81 to 3 buildings, which would not
Okay.
include the increase to assessed value as a result of the 60,000 square feet.
yeah, I got it.
the
That would be
four
separate.
buildings. Yes.
That'll be later.
Correct.
So then the second phase would be 400 Berman?
Well,
Second
second phase would be the 60,000 square feet at
Gotcha.
Cal,
Okay,
and potentially
if
the
approved.
expansion on 400 Berman Boulevard. I mean, if it,
No,
well,
I thought we were gonna, this is.
I know.
This is where we get confused. The current thinking,
you know what I'm thinking is the steps are screwing me up.
right, it's not steps.
It's not steps, it's part of phase one,
Right.
pardon me.
The resolution that we're trying to work toward would, 347, that's its own, deal. 400 would be the stabilization of the tax on the existing buildings and the benefit on the new building when it comes on, with a trigger of when it had to come on by. And then on, Cal 81, it would be, a retention on the 4 buildings and the future phase of the 5th building. Subject to a further proceeding of your board.
Yeah. That makes sense. I had the benefit of going through this on Friday. Was it Friday?
Yes.
So,
So what are your thoughts at this point on, that particular concept? That this be, put together, but it's in phases. Phase, okay? Use phase.
Does that sound?
I think it's a smart idea, instead of us now, we give them, in effect, we're giving them the go-ahead to go and get it, but they're not gonna get it until they get it completed.
Until they get it, until they do
Yeah.
it.
All right, I get that. Believe me.
The other, feel I wanted to get from the board was, a sense of the board was, how do you feel on the terms with regard to 10 or 15-year?
I prefer the 10,
Mhm.
just because it's consistent with what we've done in the past. But I acknowledge that this is a, very special case, and it's also within EPCAL, which we have a very, very fine focus
Defined,
on,
right.
between EPCAL and
Use.
downtown, so, I think I would be open maybe to,
Okay.
considering it in this particular project or instance, but I want us to be
I-
consistent with what we've done in the past,
Right.
in a
And-
way that makes
And
sense.
Bob, you had an interesting perspective, on the term length as well. In that the greater the term, the longer the term, the longer we secure them here.
yeah, I was more in favor of 20 for that reason. It doesn't, guarantee that they'll stay here, but I think, 10 years is a very short amount of time for what they're doing and their expansion, and even 15.
Right.
But 20 kind of puts some sort of, I can't think of it,
Sustainability.
But
I'm gonna use the word
in
leash.
In your line of thought though, by
Yeah.
giving them the 20, they're incentivized to maybe look to build the next phase and still stay here and bring that FCAL up
Exactly.
even higher. Because they're gonna have 400 people working here. It could be 600 to 800 people working, the way they're growing.
If we can let them grow, yes.
If it's
If
10
we can
and
let them
everything.
grow, it's pretty important,
Yes.
unfortunately.
You hear that, Jim?
I mean,
Not
what-
you, Jim, that Jim. Sorry.
But Tracy, in talking to them on Friday, their growth rate is exponential.
Yes.
And they're already planning, I could see it, for another 60 to 100,000 square feet, really right around the corner.
Well, when they came to us, they said, we need 200.
Yeah.
And that, we need 200 in 5 years.
That makes sense.
And, we could only find, I found the 70,000 square feet, and they need to build the additional 60, and they were planning on the 25. So unless something happens, yes,
But easily, I could see them going for another 100,000 in a
it would be
heartbeat.
wonderful.
So I think, Bob may be correct and go for the 20 and incentivize them, stay here.
Well, on the one hand, you got Lori, and I happen to agree with that, as one board member. That 10,000 is where we would go, 10 years, excuse me, is where we would normally go. And then they want 100% for the 10 years. We don't do that. That would be a break, right?
It would be special.
Special, yes. And they want that, I think, across the board.
They do,
Everything they're doing-
that's the request, it was on the 4 properties,
10
across the
yeah,
board,
100%.
100% for 15 years. Which, I've had discussions with him already explaining that, this is a retention case. It would be something, new to our board to review, versus, the normal and typical increase to assessed value on all the properties. 347 is not necessarily going to increase the assessed value, but if we keep them here and they continue to grow, we are going to get a lot more increase in assessed value, a lot more jobs, and maybe even more from this company. So, it's different in that, and I said, and the board does not typically, outside of our, affordable housing projects, go beyond, 10 years. So I said, we will likely come back to you with a counter proposal. They are prepared for that, I'm not sure they'll accept it, but, in turn, we are now negotiating for more options on the lease, which is positive to me. A positive result of what the state's provided, anything the county has provided, and what we may provide. But our relief for them is helping, or should help, offset some of the hurdles they're facing and the delays that are costing them money. The delays in expansion are costing them money. And,
What's causing those delays?
you have zoning
Is
and
it
environmental
town?
constraints
Yeah.
here.
Well, it's the constraints on the expansion that they need now. Essentially, what it really boils down to is that they've reached a capacity where they can only accept so many orders of certain sizes, in terms of, these build-outs of these wall units for the buildings. So they get called quite often with opportunities that they don't simply have the capacity for.
They don't have the capacity.
And
Capacity to
the
grow.
demand in the building industry is such is that they're not gonna wait.
No,
You
but
know,
I
they're-
meant, what are the constraints on the, not them expand, the constraints on them expanding? One is DE's environmental, and is the other one like
Dick, would you like to explain how the subdivision was approved and how they were assigned?
Just briefly.
Yeah, you don't have to, I mean,
I think the town's working very hard,
That's all I wanna hear.
to
It's on your
remedy,
side.
when you wind the view back here, it was a war production plant. It paid a pilot, the Grumman facility paid a pilot to the town every year because it was a federal facility. And they stopped paying that pilot when Grumman left, and then the property stayed off the tax roll as it was for many years until it was sold. And these folks were one of the original tenants
Yeah.
at the site,
Mhm.
under the town's community development agency leases.
That's correct.
And no taxes, to my knowledge, were paid during the town's, Laverne could correct me on that, but I don't believe any taxes were paid by tenants of the town when it was under the CDA ownership.
Just rental?
They made a rental
She's saying
payment to
no.
the community development agency. And owners, this one included, needed the certainty of ownership in the transition to the new owner. So there were land purchases that were not benefited through the subdivision process. That was problematic because it put the cart before the horse. People were buying
The deeds.
described property without it having been approved to
And
be
now what do I do?
described in that fashion. Then, so the divider, retained the right to describe the property through the subdivision process. And that resulted in the distribution of yield as determined on a map. And that map has now been shown to be inadequate for the current needs of the owners, which they didn't perceive back when they were young, hopeful businesses. They thought they had expansion galore, which hasn't turned out to be the case. So now the town is forced to reanalyze what is fair in the circumstance. The town is not the only deciding factor. We have a letter, and I think the fact that they're working with the state to get the state grants is helpful to the town in the overall redistribution and improvement of the lot coverage, because the state vitally realizes that more use on this industrial property is beneficial to the welfare of the state of New York. So the state is giving $4 million, which really I can't think of any enterprise we've had that's gotten a $4 million
The affordable housing project. Actually, there are loads.
for manufacturing?
No,
I
not
don't
for
think we've ever
manufacturing.
seen.
No, not for
I don't think we've
manufacturing.
ever seen a job project
No, not for.
with anything close to
Manufacturing is
this.
highly coveted.
And manufacturing, and
Particularly on Long Island.
generally Long Island is viewed by Albany in comparison to upstate, where they say, you guys on Long Island don't need anything, we've gotta funnel that all upstate. And so I think it's a feather in the cap of this applicant and the town of Riverhead to have gotten that grant. And certainly it helps the state's, other arms, its environmental arms and others, to understand the strategic nature of this. So I think it's progressing, and we'll work out that the map will be amended in such a way that there'll be greater use of the property. But it's a process, it's not, Councilman Wooten can certainly attest to that, and, but the town has been firmly supportive.
Yes.
And the supervisor's office has been firmly supportive of helping this particular applicant and other similarly situated applicants.
We're advertising for a new environmental planner. That we just seen stick down.
What was that, Jim? I'm
Just for
sorry.
them?
Huh?
Just for them?
Well, but that's,
That's all part of it, part of the
that's part of it.
analysis.
But, so I guess the short answer to your question is there are historic reasons why they need relief, and the government's aware of that and is working on it.
Thank you.
Do we have any other issues that we wanted to address, or any other?
No, I wanted to,
Let
lay
me,
the land.
Let me ask a couple of questions, and let me go this way. On the table is Bob's 20 years. Tony said, well, that might be interesting, for starters. The other thing is it, what was it, 15 years or 10 years? I started out with, 10 years, 485B is the best we do, that's manufacturing, but it's declining, so it's not 10 years, 100% deduction, or no taxes. So you could, modify that if the board's opinion is that, 20 years could be a really good thing as far as retention, because they stay longer and they have more opportunity to do more things that they want. So you'd have to assume that this organization is gonna be around that long and interested in continuing to grow. Its current, people will be 20 years older, so it may or may not be true, depending on how they, continue to, further their organization. But you could say, okay, instead of 10, maybe we should do 15, that's part of their request. But it's still gonna be decreasing. And maybe the decrease, if the board is of the mind, could be that, we'll give you a couple of years to get yourself moving on the phase one that we're gonna do. So we won't, we'll leave it at 100%. Then it goes to 50 and you got the rest of the 15 years. Is a potential compromise. I'm not selling it, I'm just saying, we're gonna have to arrive somewhere that we think is fair to this, owner of a very highly prized business in our town. At the same token is, within the purview of the kind of things that we can do and have done in the past. And it takes into the retention aspect, it takes into, this is a special case, but based on what I know, it sure is. It's a heck of a good manufacturing opportunity. And hope that we hit it right, so that each side gets what they should be getting. So, on the one hand, we wanna give them as much as we can, on the other hand, we've got certain things that we have to do to protect our town and our own organization, and it's past history, in my opinion. So that's really where we're headed.
I mean, you've always, I'm new here, but you've always talked about, these things declining on a straight line basis. I presume you can carve that any way you want though,
I would
right?
think so, yeah.
Right, so I mean, if you're gonna pick an alternative period, you could also carve that decline in a way that somehow, is, more interesting or more appealing as well. So, you know, that's something else you can consider, something that.
Provides more cash flow up
Well,
front
keep-
and then
right,
declines.
It gets the town
Yeah.
an ability to, you know, take some value in as well as time passes, but in a different way perhaps than straight line.
See, and I think that 10 years is far too short a period of time. When I was speaking to them about putting up that 60,000 square foot building, they're not looking about completing that for like the end of 2020. So you give them 10 years, 2 years are right down the drain, they haven't made a penny on it, as far as that's concerned, and you wanna retain this company. I would venture, I would at least give them a minimum of 15 years, and maybe the first 2 years, give them 100% tax rate, you know, rebate. And then go down to your decreasing values for the next 13 years.
I have a question. I mean, there's nothing that regardless of the time, and I agree, 10 is absolutely too short. But even if we gave them 20, right? These guys are growing, and it's obvious they are turning down work. But they could leave after 15 years. They can go to Kentucky if somebody says, we're gonna build you a building, and, you know, and you know what I'm saying? They're not, they can leave, that's.
Yeah, we have recapture provisions during the life of the
Yeah, that's the other thing.
pilot. However, if the
They're not
pilot ends, they're free to go.
I mean, if you
I'm
took-
hoping they'll have so much vested here that they would not even consider it.
Right, well, that's my, so in 20 years, right, and there's recapture provisions, are they strong enough to incentivize them to stay, or are they, you know, what?
I don't have the percentages in front of me, you know, it scales by year.
You know, I'm just throwing it out there, cause I don't know, but I'm with you, I mean, 2 years before you build, I've seen much smaller buildings, and not, you know, larger than a house, take a year and a half, 2 years.
Just to clarify on that, the phase 2 approach to the 60,000 square foot building, that abatement wouldn't become effective until your board made a future resolution about the 60,000 square foot building. And what we usually do is provide a 2-year construction
Building
period
limit.
where they pay the current tax, which in this case would just be the land, which they're paying already. So I think we have to separate the timing issue for the 60,000 square foot building from the timing issue on the retention and the 25,000 square foot building. We were considering in the projections that the 25,000 square foot building would have to go online within 5 years, and on the date that it went into service, that would commence the 10-year period if you chose to stick with the 10 years. So, but if the point is that 10 years is inadequate, then it would trip to the 15 or some other number of years. So there's, I don't want everyone to think that it's like tomorrow and 10 years from now, it's done.
Right.
Because of the nature of it, there's, on the retention side, there's tomorrow and 10 years. On the new construction side, there's when it happens and 10 years. For the 25,000 square foot building and for the 60,000 square foot building. The 60,000 square foot building is more, open to future, you know, hey, they're doing a good job and you're happy with how they're performing and they can show you good results. Maybe you could go ahead and give them 15 on the expansion at a later time. So we're really trying to understand, I think what Tracy's looking for is the mood of the board on the retention time period abatements and the 25,000 square foot after it's commenced, when it's placed into service, I should say.
Well, let's see if we can try that on in this respect. Move to the board.
And it's
10
not
years
binding.
out, 15 years in, or more than 10 years, let's say that. Does that fit with your eyes at this point? Well, what I'm trying to do is to get something that's not written in stone, but an opportunity for you.
To do some calculations.
We can do calculations and send you projections. I think what we'd like to come away from is, what would you like to see in the way of projections? You could say, hey, hold them at 50% on the one that's at 50% right now, that's the 400 building. Hold them at 50% for 3 years. Then give them another 10 increasing for 13. I mean, we can run, you know, we can take these sheets and we can run the numbers.
Yeah, but I need some,
So the existing building is 400, and that expires when?
5 years.
In 5 years from now? Okay, and their first, phase will be the 25,000 square feet. Okay, so the 60 is after that, so all said and done.
On 400, there's a retention aspect and there's an expansion
No,
aspect.
I understand that, so, and that's what I'm just trying to, you know, and it, is the 25,000 square foot expansion, is that ready to go, or is that?
That's pretty close.
That's pretty close, okay, I just wanna get some sense, because when I say 20 years, I mean, when you look at all this, we're almost out to 17 or 18 years from today, right, with the phases. Okay, so I'm getting a better grasp on,
If you're not comfortable taking a position this evening, because there's a lot of material to digest,
Yeah.
you know, you could send an email to Tracy and just say what your request is, because whatever you request, we can
Calculate.
we can generate that.
Spit it out to you.
Yeah, I'd like to see them, I don't have a vote, but I'd like to see the numbers. IDA has always intrigued me, but I can't help but think that Island, because of the early incentives that they got very early on, that helped to lead to some of their success that they're
Oh,
achieved now.
absolutely.
To the point now where they
We
want to
certainly agree.
expand. And, you know, it's nice, but, you know, I'd like to see what the numbers are as far as the town tax base and what that does to that over.
Or can you work with that?
How long you elongate.
Yeah, and actually,
Dick, can you work with that?
Yeah, sure, and if the board members would
Would
just
be like, what can I do to make a proposal like this?
send us your comments and I mean, we've heard what you had to say tonight. It sounds like
Yeah.
there's latitude on the number of years. It's not firm in everybody's mind. It would be 10, structure something over a few more years,
Right.
and dovetail it with the cash flows.
I'm encouraged by the employment. I was talking to a friend who works for Rivet Bill Supply for the last 33 years, and I didn't realize that they have thousands of employees that make a living. Actually, are able to live here, you know, throughout, well, now they want.
not just Calverton, right, they're in Rhode Island
Oh,
now,
no,
they're, yeah,
Connecticut, East Hampton, wherever, but, I know a lot of friends of mine that I graduated from school with that raised their families working for their building supply. And I see this as a very comparable business.
Yes.
That people will be there for years and years to come, so.
Tracy, could we see 15-year comparisons and 20-year comparisons?
So
Yes.
15 and what?
15 and 20 comparisons?
Yes.
So should we take the declining, So when we talk about the abatement, we're talking, 0 or 50 to start, and so we need to, have that thought in mind. In manufacturing is traditionally the 0 to start, and go up to the 100 if you go over 20 years, it's 5% a year, if you go over 10 years, 10% a year, is that what you're thinking?
And you have a couple of years, or you have years on the front end where you
So
don't pay,
do.
you don't pay any additional tax.
Okay.
But
It's a,
Front-loaded years.
So maybe
You wanna
get
see
some-
front-loaded years.
Front-loaded,
yeah,
right.
I think so.
Get some cash flow.
so,
Which is
I'm gonna-
probably more important to them anyway.
right now, let me ask you, there's two things here. First of all, triggers. Is there anything besides a potential labor trigger, which probably, well, you could put it in and feel better about it. This sounds like an organization, to me at least, that they say they're gonna hire them, they'll probably hire them, and they probably, surpass it. That's been their history. Remains to be seen, but,
Yeah.
are there any other triggers that your, experience, or in yours, Dick, that, help us to manage what we may do? And have a clawback situation, or you just don't get any more money, forget the clawback, if you don't reach these, projections by such and such.
Well, in this instance, given it's a retention case, the employment, which typically in a retention case, you don't see new employment. So,
Yeah,
that's
you're
an
just
added.
afraid they're gonna leave.
Leave, right.
That's an
Yeah.
added bonus
Well,
for
so
us,
this
cause
is
we're
both.
actually, keeping them, and we're keeping them because they were gonna leave because they couldn't hire. So, by they've already, as far as I'm concerned, met a commitment, really, by taking on the lease, getting into the lease and expanding the 68,000 square feet. Purchasing the new equipment and retrofitting the building, that's still underway, as we speak, but for the most part, they're operating in there. That would be a trigger. The employment number is a trigger. And then progress toward the construction that's within their control. So submitting the site plans, getting the drawings, I don't know what else we could use.
Yeah, that's a thought, we could have something that, within so many months of the town's adoption of the relaxed, square footage formulas, that they must submit a site plan in suitable form. I mean, I think we could talk to them about that. They're saying they need the town to amend things to permit it. Well, if the town does it, then you're expecting that they're gonna promptly act on that and do it. So, that would seem to be very reasonable.
Or the second thing here is, the second thing is that, there's a timeline on going from this discussion to a final, this is what we think we're willing to provide as a board. And, in between, you gotta see what's coming in from our board as to what they think at this point in time. You may change your mind in the future. You just don't know yet, you gotta see the numbers first, among other things. It seems to me, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, that this can all be done, and we can meet and, give them consideration that we're willing to go in a week, Monday, 14th. It seems to me to be not likely. Anyone care to comment on that?
I agree.
I mean, just getting it sorted out, that'll take a few days, things, so.
So, from your reading of Island Resources with their head people, you told me that, you did discuss we'll try to do this as fast as possible, but you didn't tell them we're gonna give you next Monday.
I did not commit, no.
Okay.
Well, I think it's important that you can say that the board, at least from what I'm hearing, is favorable in looking to do what they can.
Sure.
It's fair for everybody, so that to be a good sign to them.
Mm-hmm.
Any other thoughts on how we can, well, speed it up is not what I'm looking at, but expedite this without, having that as the lead?
The back end of
Thought.
next week should be doable.
I'm sorry?
The back end of next committee, but I don't know.
Yeah, and then you've got, your executive director in Albany for,
That's true.
I'm away the following week, that week.
so.
And then the
So
next
the following
Monday is
Thursday.
the holiday.
Special meeting.
Well, you see,
the-
then
Yeah,
we're
so
pushing
all
there
of
a
a all of a
reason-
sudden
We
we're
don't have to do Mondays?
pushing into, February. You know,
What?
Pushing into February if you, we're already at the seventh.
There's a lot of January left.
Yes, I'm thinking,
Well, there isn't.
No, there's not a lot of January left.
No?
Well, let's not try to come up with a date, we just have to
When's the
work as
meeting in
fast as
February?
we can.
I'm sorry?
The meeting in February is the fourth?
Yeah, don't think
Yes.
so.
Yes.
Well, why don't we start with, Tracy, how long do you think it's realistic to turn the
Good, that's
information
right.
around and get it ready for people just to look at? I mean, and you're looking for input from us, if we've got any input tomorrow, we'll give you as well,
Yes.
so.
I mean, I'll probably have a spreadsheet for you to look at by Wednesday.
If we give you input tomorrow.
Yeah, well, I got a better feel today,
Yeah,
so,
Well, I think it's reasonable to digest it overnight, and then, just tell Tracy the same thing, is that what you think we should do, and if you come up with something else, or you wanna modify your own thoughts because of what you heard discussed tonight, and that's where I'm at.
Yep.
If I went out what I thought before this meeting, without the input of, you as valuable board meetings, I would've,
if you're gonna
Here-
wait,
here's a-
something
here's a
different.
great to
suggestion.
close it up before you went away.
so that'd be the 14th, I mean, if.
No, that
we
would
do
be
have
the
some
20th, that would be the
time
19th.
constraints on considering
So we can wait.
Atlantis.
We wondered if perhaps we could offer if the staff could offer a counter proposal there. The aquarium, they need to sign contracts for these things, and the contract dates become important with the date that your resolution is adopted. So, given that there was no adverse public comment, and I sensed a favorable,
yeah, if we had a resolution, I think
if
we
we
could
had,
do it now.
could the board consider, I don't have one.
Special meeting.
I know you don't.
Could you consider a special meeting in a week to address the aquarium issue?
And
And
then
at
if
that
we're
time,
prepared-
and at that time,
Any other new
we
business?
could bring you up to speed on where we are. In other words, if we're close, we're close, if we're not close, we're not. And then at least you could, say to Tracy, well, now we got this and we want more. Not to say that you would approve or disapprove anything that night, but you'd have the aquarium as the special meeting,
Let's just keep
and
moving.
we'd answer any new questions you have.
I'm gonna be here that night anyway, 'cause I have a meeting at 6, so.
I'm okay, you're okay,
What date you looking at?
okay?
Monday.
A week from
Let's
today.
do it.
Oh, 14th.
Mm-hmm.
Martin Luther King.
What do we have to do as far
Is
as?
that a
I got nothing
holiday?
on- I got nothing on the 14th.
Is that a holiday?
No, it's the 21st.
No, the following Monday is a holiday.
Okay.
What do we have to do with publication?
Well, Tracy has to notify the media,
have time?
and, one of the media is here as we speak.
Media is notified.
Media, and you post it on the wall?
Notify the media, it should go on the website, and,
Yeah.
and it should go on the town clerk
We do it
bulletin
5
board,
five o'clock again?
and.
Yes,
And you've checked on the availability of the room?
I know that there is an ag meeting
At
on
6.
7, at
6.
6?
Yeah.
Yeah, but we shouldn't take an hour,
No.
so if we meet at 5,
Yeah, I'm
isn't
not-
it normally 7?
Now, Dick,
Yeah, but in the wintertime, we go to 6.
Yeah, we had to wait
Can
for
you
them
find out
last
about
time, we
that
had.
capital
Daylight saving
improvement?
time, you know, I mean.
Sorry.
Can you find out about that capital improvement question
The
I had
capital-
before you figure
Oh,
out
yeah.
all
Oh, cap
It's really
improvement on
good.
Atlantis,
the
right?
Yep.
plans?
Yep.
Yes.
I'm just thinking about
And
that
then
heating coil.
What
Cooling
types, you talked about triggers for the capital improvements?
Yes,
Are there triggers for the, retention piece in the upfront years?
Really, on retention, typically
I don't know
not.
if there's
I
typically
mean,
anything
You're
done.
trying to rescue them
Yeah,
with a
no, I
retention
know.
case.
Right, you're trying to.
In our instance, we're lucky that if we keep them, they have to expand, they need to expand.
Right.
So we're gonna get new employment if we keep them here,
Right.
which is great.
Yeah, well, let's stay with
When
what
they,
we have.
when we,
I'm sorry.
when
Let's
they-
stay with what we have so far. That is, let's not try to engineer triggers right now, unless they're really, eureka.
We're gonna try to compete on a worldly basis with land acquisitions and costs of doing business. You're trying to balance Delaware.
Well, there's
Yeah.
no
Put it in
balance,
your
there's,
thoughts.
I mean,
but,
Put it
if
in
the
your
state
thoughts.
yeah,
hadn't
no,
come
I
in,
just wasn't sure if that was something.
probably
that
would've
was
lost
done.
them.
I'm
That's
just,
exactly what
trying
we're trying to do, and I
trying
think
to
this is a good
Yeah.
model
corral
to
this
see
dude.
if we can do it.
Alright, so 5 o'clock and 6 o'clock, can we meet earlier, just to be sure?
I can check.
I'm good,
4 o'clock?
whatever time you want.
I'm good on Monday.
Let's go for 4, if we have, we're not gonna use 2 hours, but.
Uh-huh.
It'll
Anything
be
in-
light out on
anybody
Field
in-
View.
I've got
coming
nothing
up.
on my calendar, I'll check the
Don't count at
secretary's
5, it'll
calendar.
be over, we'll be walking out. Alright,
We got a small enough booth, we can be in
well, that's true,
the
too.
room over
but,
off the town board room.
We have to be here because we're televised.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
right.
We need the,
That's right.
Oh.
Oh, we
we need
have
the
to-
accommodations of
That's
the.
That's right.
And the rec doesn't have to be televised, right?
I don't
So
know if
should
we've
we do
adopted
4
any,
o'clock
any
next
policy on that,
They can go somewhere
I
else.
don't, yeah.
They're advisory,
Good
they're not
enough.
legislative.
You wanna go for
Okay.
that?
Margie has to
Sure.
go, I'm not sure.
4 o'clock Monday?
So perhaps a resolution to call a special meeting,
Decide on, Atlantis
You've
and,
got them on that.
further the,
special meeting to consider the Atlantis
January
approval
14th?
on the
Yes.
good, very good.
14th at 4 o'clock and
I have to say,
such,
Any
and
other business
continuing
that they-
discussion of the, I think you should say in your notice, it's to consider Atlantis and continuing discussion
Do you want a motion to do that?
I'll make a motion that we have a special meeting on January 14th at 4 PM at Riverhead Town Hall to discuss the Atlantis project and potentially the island companies.
Good. Second,
Very good, you remembered all.
all those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Okay, very good, that's what we do.
Tracy, he mentioned to us, the other day that he could give us the financials.
Yeah, I had them, and
I'll
you know
have-
what, you left
I'll have an
without
update
them.
on the town,
Okay,
the
well,
town
So
is-
I have them at the office.
Is it a lot, or is it,
No, I can actually email them, I'll put them with a password
okay,
protected,
okay,
and get nervous.
yeah, sure.
And, they actually also got a draft commitment today too, which we should have, and it's more than what they, expected, a commitment letter. So we'll have that possibly also,
Okay, good.
which helps.
All right, we have the executive director's report.
Now we don't.
I was hoping you'd say that.
Thank you.
I had a
Yeah.
lot going on this month, and there's
All right.
lots of new stuff, but
Any-
you'll get it next month,
Good
or
job.
maybe Monday.
Any more new business from the floor?
No,
Okay. Need a motion to adjourn?
motion to adjourn?
Second?
Second.
All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Who, I'm sorry, who did that?
Impressed,
12 after
Anthony
7?
Tony
and
and,
Sue
impressed.
and Jim?
Jim.
Yeah, looks good.
oh, you want these
Oh,
folders
okay.
back, right?
Valued commodity.
Oh, what about this one, did we do?
We didn't do that yet.
Wow. Oh, we do that now?
No, we have another meeting.
We have another meeting.
One more meeting.
All right,
We have another meeting.
let's crank up
It's
the
only
Economic Job Development
administrative.
Corporation. May I have your attention?
Yes.
Okay. I need a motion to call to order the Economic Job Development Corporation annual meeting. So moved.
Second.
At 7:11.
Need a motion to adopt the proposed agenda. A motion, please.
Motion.
First, okay, second.
Second.
Anthony?
All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
All right, now, in the same manner that we did this with the IDA, the appointment of officers, committees, contracting officer, and endorsement of depository, I need a motion to approve those all in an omnibus style.
I'll make the motion
Thank
to
you.
approve 2,
Second.
3, 4, and 5.
Thank you.
Second.
Who was that? Thank you.
All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Okay,
Can you,
approved,
minutes, you skipped over the minutes.
thank you. I also need a motion to approve the minutes of the December 10th meeting.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Second?
All those in favor, aye? The treasurer's report?
Yes.
You have it handy?
Yep.
Thank you.
That's right here.
You got it?
Just, what's the
Oh,
bottom
wait,
line
no,
we
I-
can redo?
Like to move to
Never
put that
mind,
in
I
a high
buried
yield
it.
bond?
Okay.
Lori wasn't sitting next to you this time.
See,
did-
Tony, it's your job.
Tony.
No, it's become my job.
All right,
now.
Yes.
so the balance in the LDC account at December 31st, 2018 was $250.
As it should be, right?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly as it should be. Pilots for 2018, 2019 tax year was sent out December 19th.
That's IDA.
Oh, why is it under LDC?
I don't know.
I know, cause I'm reading that, I'm going,
She just put it in a separate bullet
okay,
point,
all right,
that's all.
so we're done.
Okay.
So can we
That's
get
Motion,
a
a
motion?
motion.
Yeah.
Second,
Second,
Who was that first?
Tony.
yeah, Bob. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Okay, no old business, there's none, committee reports none, new business none.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, second, all those in favor, aye? Aye. All right, we'll close the meeting at,
Thank you very much, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Boy,